All right, guys, I have a short one for you this morning. It's a short editorial. I went through so many different stories, and there's so much I could give to you. I didn't even know where to start, but I wanted to give you one that directly references a bad cop. Bad cop. And a cop that needs a good kick in the ass. But I mean, there were so many I could give you. The world's going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, we've got over 60 arrests in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where they were demonstrating and rioting, and the National Guard had to be called out. There was a building set on fire outside of the ICE building in Portland, Oregon. Protesters stormed the police headquarters in Columbus and had to be held back. And the officer in Kenosha that shot Jacob Blake in the back returned to work, and they said the shooting is justified. Then, of course, the protest in Minnesota was over the shooting of Dante Wright. The officer who pepper sprayed the lieutenant was fired, and the lieutenant's going to sue the police department in Virginia, Windsor, Virginia. So there's so much going on. I mean, it's like, I did a couple of those I did do editorials on. A couple of them I didn't do the editorial on the officer returning to work because I think we already knew that his shooting had been justified, right? Or I'm not sure. I'm not justifying it. He shot the guy in the back. But I think they had already said that he was going to be returning to work. I'm not sure. Anyway, that aside, all of that aside, let's talk about a bad cop. Let's talk about a guy who, you're going to love it. KWCH.com brings us the story. A former Wichita police officer will head to prison after pleading no contest to child sex crimes. Alexis Robinson, 58, of Wichita, was charged with 1 count of indecent liberties with a child and 2 counts of aggravated indecent solicitation of a child Tuesday afternoon.
A police officer and security official for Wichita schools will not stand trial for child sex crimes. 58-year-old Alexis Robinson pleaded no contest to indecent liberties with a child and aggravated indecent solicitation of a child.
Judge David Kaufman sentenced him to 60 months in prison. Robinson will first complete his prison sentence in Colorado before being returned to Kansas to serve his time there. In Colorado, he has 7 to 8 years remaining on his prison term. He is scheduled to go before the parole board in Colorado next month.
The case involved 3 victims in 2011 and 2012 in Wichita. His trial had been set to start next week.
Robinson's charges involved boys ages 11 to 14 years old and spanned 12 years beginning in 2000. At the time of his January 2013 arrest, Robinson was a security supervisor at Wichita Public Schools. He also served on the Wichita Police Department for 22 years, sat on the board for Real Men, Real Heroes, and volunteered with the Boys and Girls Club. So here this guy was not only a cop for 22 years, he was a member of Real Men, Real Heroes, which are guys who, kind of like the Big Brother program with younger people, kind of a role model. And then, of course, he volunteered with the Boys and Girls Club. Of course he did. He's a pedophile. Some of you might go, well, you should say alleged pedophile. No, he was convicted. He had 7 to 8 years left on his sentence when he was paroled. Paroled. You guys hear me? Paroled. And did it again in Wichita. And so he's going to get 5 years there after he completes his 7 to 8 years in Colorado. You think he'll be paroled again? You got to finish your 7 to 8 years, but then he'll get paroled in another 5. He'll go to Wichita, Kansas, do 3 and get paroled. Is it because he's a former cop? Now, what's funny is his 2013 arrest, 7 to 8. So I don't know how long he had on the Colorado one. But here this guy has 7 to 8 years. Let's just say he's got 13 years to do, 8 and 5. If somebody who's not a law enforcement officer gets caught as a pedophile, usually they're looking at about 20 years. Especially with his pedophilia ranged 12 years. 12 years this guy did this. And I don't know how much he did before he was paroled. But he was paroled, so he didn't do the whole thing. But he's got, let's say, 8, and then this new judge gave him 5, so he's got 13 more years. Not 20, like you or I would be looking at. I don't know, you think he's even going to make it out of prison? Being a short eyes? We hope not. Community Leo Watch, asking you what you think in the comment section below. Community Leo Watch, watching Leos, that's law enforcement officers, to include chomos who wear a badge from coast to coast.